Hello. As you guys already probably know, my name is Dr. Sloan Beard and I'm with the Gymnast Fix. And I'm so thankful that you are taking a chunk of time out of your busy day to dive into some things that are going to really help improve the safety, the longevity, and the performance of all of your athletes. So we're just going to dive right into it. In the office here, I work out of my clinic here in Birmingham, Alabama. I see all athletes. I see athletes of every kind, but majority of those athletes are gymnasts, dancers, cheerleaders. And so I see a ton of tumbling and jumping and extension-based injuries. Now, out of my gymnasts, the majority of injuries that I do see are low back injuries. And I should probably use the word injury loosely because a lot of what I do see is just simply pain. It's not necessarily an injury quite yet. So the majority of pain that I see is low back pain. So with that being said, I wanted to bring you guys some very, very valuable information that you can apply and utilize with your athletes in order to keep their low backs safe as well as increase their performance, like I said before. So let's just dive right in. So I wanted to title this something that would kind of catch your attention. So the most neglected muscle in gymnastics, what do you think that could be? We don't neglect very much in gymnastics. We think about biceps, and we think about deltoids, and we think about lumbar erectors, and we think about hamstrings all day long, especially when we're writing up our conditioning programs. But one muscle that we forget about every single time is the thoracic diaphragm. Now, I'm going to use these notes off here to the side as a guideline for myself. I could talk about this stuff for what feels like hours, but we're going to try to keep this short and sweet for you guys because I know you got to get back out on the floor with those athletes. So this is my guideline, and hopefully these notes out to the side will help you stay on track with me, but as well give you maybe some visual so that you can comprehend some of the things that I'm talking about. I'm a very visual person, so I've got like my props over here if I need them, because I start to use my hands a lot. At first, when I started recording this video, it was just the screen and I wasn't a part of it, but I have to use these guys. So you'll see me over here. I'm actually going to make me small here in a second, but if I need to use my props, I'm going to pull them out. But anyways, if you want these notes, I can certainly email them to you. You just email and request them from me. You'll find my email at the end of this presentation. Okay, so let's just dive in. So what is the thoracic diaphragm? So let's make me small here. All right, so the thoracic diaphragm is the very top muscle of our core. It's got several roles that it plays within our body. It cuts our thorax, our chest from our abdomen. It separates the two of those. So think like your lungs don't touch your stomach, right? So that muscle, this very dome, or what says here, parachute-shaped muscle separates your thorax, your lungs, from your abdominal contents or your abdominal cavity. Now, why is the thoracic diaphragm so very important in gymnastics? Well, we're going to get into that. And I can guarantee you that no one in part of their conditioning next to the ab setup over here and the lunge setup over here has like the thoracic diaphragm set up here. Now, the reason that it's called the thoracic diaphragm is because it's in the thoracic part of the body. You also have a pelvic diaphragm, which sits down in the pelvic bowl. You also have a diaphragm within the skull up here. So you've got multiple diaphragms in the body. So I'm just going to abbreviate and call it the diaphragm now, but know when I say the diaphragm, I'm talking about that muscle that cuts, see, I've got to use my body, that cuts your chest from your abdomen. Okay, so the diaphragm. So this muscle, like I said, has many, many roles, but we're going to talk about why those roles are important for your athletes. So just visualize where it's at, and you'll see that it's kind of like this hat that sits on top of the lumbar spine there. This is going to be geared definitely with the lumbar spine as our primary focus, that primary area of the body that we're protecting. But if I have a gymnast that comes in that has poor ankle dorsiflexion, they keep jamming their ankles every time they have a short landing, or they've got hypermobile shoulders that keep kind of subluxing and coming back in, you better believe that I'm starting at the diaphragm when it comes to rehab. So no matter what part of the body I'm dealing with, the diaphragm still is number one to me. Okay, so there's our thoracic diaphragm. You can visualize it. Let's go ahead and move on. Now, what you'll find during this, and if you get to know me at all, I'm one of those really kind of obnoxious, cutesy, love their husband wives. My husband practices with me here in our practice, and I think he's just brilliant. We're both so lucky that we get to practice alongside of one another. He gets to learn from me, but then I also really get to learn from him. So this is a quote coming from him here. He teaches a course called Aether Breathing, which the thoracic diaphragm is going to be our primary muscle of respiration, which we'll learn here in a second. And so Aether Breathing, this comes out of his course. It says, to think that your breath and movement can be untethered from one another is akin to thinking that a bird could fly without the air flowing over its wings. Dr. Beau, my husband. I told you, you're going to get sick of me. I talk about him a whole lot. Excuse me. So what is this kind of referencing? It's saying that as a gymnast, or any athlete for that matter, as they move, to think that their movement isn't directly influenced or controlled via their breath, or like a symbiotic relationship, would be kind of naive. So breathing in that thoracic diaphragm, that respiratory muscle, is going to be so influential for their movement, just as air flowing over a bird's wings is so influential for their flight pattern. All right, so what does that diaphragm do exactly? Now, I already said it, it's the primary muscle of respiration, meaning that's its sole purpose. Like, we have so many muscles in our body that help us breathe, but the diaphragm, that's its sole purpose. That's its, not sole purpose. Ooh, it's its primary purpose. It has other purposes, which we'll get into, but that's its primary role, is to breathe for us. We have other muscles that help us respirate, and so I'll kind of label those. We've got our SCM here. We've got our scalenes, which are the front of our neck muscles here. We've got our traps. We've got our subclavius muscle. We've got our intercostals. And so what those muscles do, I'm going to make myself big here. What those muscles do when we take a breath, if I'm using these accessory, they're called accessory, meaning they're secondary. If I use my accessory respirators, I come up like that. And you can see even I get this divot through there, right? So now I'm using those muscles to contract, to pull my ribs up like that. Now, if I'm primarily using my diaphragm, you're going to see the exact opposite. I'm going to try to stand. So my diaphragm's here. So when I contract my diaphragm, it'll contract like this and push down. And when it does that, you'll actually watch this, my belly, expand. And watch up here. I'm going to sit again. I'm taking a breath using my diaphragm. I'm going to skip out of my accessory respirators up here. Watch. Another breath in. That's very different than this. Right? Can you see the difference? Okay, so our diaphragm, as our primary respirator, it creates this contraction, this downward force. Think about an infant sleeping. When you look at an infant laying down, you watch their belly rise and fall, right? They're using their diaphragm. But for some reason, as we get older, well, there's a lot of known reasons, but that's not for here nor there. For many reasons, we lose the ability to use that diaphragm as the primary respirator. We start to call on all of these secondary muscles up here through our neck and through our chest, and they contract and they start to heave our chest upwards. And that's going to create a lot of problems in our musculoskeletal system and our biomechanics. You'll find out here in a minute that it also creates a lot of problems in our nervous system. So diaphragm, primary breather. I kind of went off on a tangent there about how we lose our ability to use that diaphragm, but it's very, very important to draw sorry, I'm trying to make myself small. draw your focus back to using that diaphragm to do its job. So since our diaphragm is a primary respirator, it's responsible for our breath. It's very hard to breathe without using that diaphragm. We make way via using our secondary respiratory muscles up here. It also initiates what's called our intra-abdominal pressure. We're going to go into these here in specifics or in details here in a little bit. This thus stabilizes the lumbar spine, and that's responsible for energy transport. The diaphragm also stimulates what's called the vagus nerve. This is a very big cranial nerve. It comes out of our brain, goes all the way down, 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 goes right through, pierces through, just like my headphone cords here, right through our diaphragm. And that diaphragm, when it contracts, it stimulates that vagus nerve. It gives us a vagal response. The vagus nerve is heavily influences what's called our parasympathetic nervous system and influences our parasympathetic drive. All right, so those are the main little key points that I want you to think of what the diaphragm does. So think back when I said, hey, this muscle, this muscle right here is the one muscle that we're neglecting in gymnastics. Look at all that it does. All of these things right here. Now let's dive into that, okay? If I were to put up, most important or most neglected muscle in gymnastics is the hamstring, I would have a long list of things that the hamstring does as well, but we're focusing on the hamstring. We're not focusing on the diaphragm, and we really need to draw, as coaches, as healthcare practitioners, we need to do our gymnasts a favor and draw our attention back to their midline, back to their diaphragm. All right, let's get into it. So let's start with respiration. Like I said, diaphragm, primary respirator, it's imperative for breathing. But we have learned as a society, and especially as females, we have learned to use accessory respirators to do the diaphragm's job. Now, when we do that, we have some consequences. We are not able to utilize the bottom nearly third of our lungs. I'm trying to outline it here for you if you can see me using the mouse. We cannot utilize the bottom third of each lung when we use our accessory respirators. If we are not fully contracting and pulling that diaphragm down, we lose the ability of 1/3 of our lung function. Now, the way that we use our lungs, you can see out here, we have these alveoli. Well, oxygen is brought into the lung and it is blown through those alveoli, and our body transports that, and that's respiration, is the transportation of gases across the linings there, the cell walls. And we utilize that oxygen, but we can only utilize oxygen if it's coating the surface area of inside of our lungs. So if we're decreasing the surface area by by a third, we've lost so much ability to transport that oxygen and utilize that oxygen within our muscles. And I'm not just talking about, I'm out of breath by my third pass. Now my muscles can't get oxygenated blood that they deserve. So just by focusing on the diaphragm during breathing, especially heavy breathing, we can obtain more oxygen within our body, which is going to increase ability to use our muscles. It's going to increase our stamina, increase our strength. So it's very important. So I mentioned this change in using our diaphragm primarily, and instead using our accessory respirators up here. Why is that? I say for gymnasts, the primary reason is that we're put in leotards and we're told to suck in. We're told, pull your belly button in. The phrase belly button is spine, if I could just get rid of that phrase, toss it out, it draws the belly button in. And I'll have a diagram here in a second that you'll be able to see a little bit better. When it draws the belly button in, it actually pulls the diaphragm up, and now the diaphragm is flaccid and it cannot contract. And when it can't contract, I have to use all these accessory respirators up here. So anytime I suck in, I have no ability to use that diaphragm. So as gymnasts, we're taught to suck in at an early age. We're also in a leotard, so vanity reasons, we might feel a little insecure and we might feel like we need to suck in. So that's a reason that we start to adopt this secondary pattern of respiration, or what's called this apical pattern up there. That's apical versus diaphragmatic or a low normal breathing pattern. So let's move on. All right, so again, back to me showing my husband far too much respect. Here's another one of his quotes: remove anatomy and use physics. A lot of times in gymnastics, we feel kind of hindered by certain anatomy, certain anatomical differences, or say we've injured our knee and we've had a few surgeries on our knee and it's just going to be a bad knee. I hate referring to things as bad, but say that's our mindset. Well, then use physics. Say we can't use that knee anymore to its best ability. We'll use physics. So now we're going to dive into physics and why that thoracic diaphragm is so critical for the sport of gymnastics. All right, so diaphragm aids in our stability. Now, like our brain wants oxygen, I use this analogy a lot, we want oxygen. Like, if it's kind of morbid, but if I were to plug your nose and close your mouth, you'd start to get a little panicky, right? Because just innately, you really want oxygen. Well, innately, your brain wants your lumbar spine to feel super, super stable. And the one way it can get that is through what's called intra-abdominal pressure. That's a fancy way of saying pressure within your abdomen. So let's see if we can remember what a little bit of high school physics, Boyle's law. So Boyle's law states that in a decrease in volume increases pressure, right? So to be able to understand how that relates to stability, let's explain what the core is. So as you can see here, I have a beach ball, and then right here with me, my prop. I'm going to make this bigger. Sort of. It'll work. All right, so I've got my ball here. Now imagine this is my midsection. So it's here, okay? All right, so the top of this ball right here is my thoracic diaphragm. It's that neglected muscle, right? Sits right here on top. My lungs sit here. My stomach sits right underneath it. All right, the front of it is going to be my rectus abdominis, or my six pack. The sides are going to be my obliques. We've got internal and external, and I've got a big muscle that spans across the front called our transverse abdominis. The back are going to be these small muscles. They're called multifidi and rotatories. Now, the back side of the core, so your core is 360 degrees around. It's not just the abs. It's all the way around you. Now, the back, a lot of times we'll have tight back muscles, and we'll think, that's not the muscles I'm talking about. Those are peripheral muscles. Those aren't a part of this. The back muscles I'm talking about, rotatories and multifidi, they're very, very small, and they attach to the spine themselves, and they play a critical role in stabilizing the lumbar spine. Then the bottom down here is going to be our pelvic floor muscles. Now that's also called our pelvic diaphragm, which is the parallel. So if this is our thoracic diaphragm, it's the parallel, the mirror image from that, under us, holding everything in. So this is the hat. The thoracic diaphragm is that hat to the abdomen. Pelvic floor is the diaper. But then our glutes are also part of that as well. So moving forward, so thinking of, oh no, is it going to hang in there with me? If not, I can do it again. How we create intra-abdominal pressure. So this is our core. Our spine runs right through the middle of that. And when all the muscles contract, some contract in together, some contract out, some eccentrically contract, some concentrically contract, but they all work in unison together. And when they work in unison together, they create what's called intra-abdominal pressure, or pressure within your abdomen. So your spine and your pelvis, spine runs right through, your pelvis sits on the bottom, your body creates that pressure, boom, and you decrease volume, because your diaphragm up top contracts and pushes down. And when it pushes down, it decreases volume within your abdomen, which increases pressure. And that pressure hugs the lumbar spine like a God-given weight belt. It squeezes that sucker and it keeps it super, super stable. But I'll tell you this, if you're not using that top muscle, that hat of the core, and that diaphragm, say you use your accessory respirators up here and you go like that. I'll show you from the side. Like that, you can see my back kind of falls into extension. This diaphragm comes up and it's flaccid. It's as if I poked a hole in the top of this ball and I lose pressure. Without that pressure, my lumbar spine cannot be stable no matter how much we muscle it. All right, we lose pressure. That means we lose safety and stability of our lumbar spine, but then we also lose the ability to transfer energy, which we'll talk about here in a second. So let me make myself small. All right, so here's a really good image that you can see this happening. So right here, I'm going to outline with my mouse here. This is the thoracic diaphragm. We've got the pelvic floor down here. We've got the sides of the core, which are our obliques, our transverse abdominis here, our rectus comes here, and then our multifidi are right in the back. And they all squeeze together. You see the inward pressure of the arrows. And when they do that, they create pressure that comes in against the spine. Some muscles actually, some push out, like the pelvic floor was going to push out, but when it does that, it's the pressure's going in. And here's the safety or the spine elements here that we're going to stabilize. So you think this, if I took a big chest breath up here and my chest heaved up, this right here would actually go up. And when this goes up, I lose pressure. I hope we're able to see that. All right, here's another view. So from the side, you can see the spine here. A is going to be a good representation of intra-abdominal pressure, proper, adequate stabilization for the lumbar spine. You can see how it keeps this spine very neutral and very safe. Over here with the red, you can see how that marks increased tension on the posterior elements of the spine here. Because this is domed, and that means that the diaphragm is not pushing down at that time, or it's pushing forward. Say right here, we're sucking the belly button in. When we do that, we cannot oppose forces well. It's like a piston. When it's done correctly, we have a piston with our thoracic diaphragm and our pelvic floor diaphragm coming together. But when we suck in, it develops this, and now this is where the greatest force is, the posterior, or the part of the spine here. This is a lot of times like your girls that they hit the table and vault and they just kind of lose it and they get saggy, and they're going to absorb all that impact right here. You know, when we hit the floor, some of us can absorb up to 17.2 times our body weight. When you have an athlete tumbling, they can absorb 17.2 times their body weight into their body. Now that's being dispersed through their feet, their ankles, their knees, their hips. But if they're correct here, that force, like a piston, can be absorbed very well and tolerated. But if we have an inadequacy or a malalignment there, because we're not utilizing that diaphragm, or we're instructed, hey, pull your belly button in, suck in, we are now distributing those ground reaction forces into the posterior part of the spine there. This is going to lead us into some traumatic back injuries. Traumatic, that sounds scary. It's not that traumatic, but it can be chronic, it can be painful, it can be career changing. It doesn't have to be career ending, but it can definitely be career changing, and it's very painful. So the back of the spine, the posterior elements here, we've got an area called our pars interticularis. Now that pars interticularis, that area for short, we're going to call pars. It takes a lot of stress every time we hyperextend the back. So every time we do a back bend or a back walkover, that area of the spine absorbs a ton of stress. Now in gymnastics, it's just necessary that we're going to have to extend over and over again. Now, because we have to do that so much, let's buy us some relief and give us a break on the other skills by decreasing the amount we extend. I already showed you when I took a big apical chest breath, when I'm not using my diaphragm effectively enough, I have to overuse these accessory respirators up here. I hyperextend my back just breathing. So if someone's hitting the table and they're sagging and they're losing it, that's a hyperextension moment. Or if they're tumbling and they lose it through their core, that's a hyperextension moment. All right, so what does this end up leading to is bony edema, or edema within the bone, which therefore can then become a stress reaction. We like to call them stress reactions over stress fractures, but it can lead to what's called a spondylolysis, or a stress reaction through the bone. If it is severe enough and it goes on long enough, it can happen bilaterally on both sides, and that's when we start to get a spondylolisthesis, where one of them starts to slide forward and they're broke all the way through. I have seen this in numerous gymnasts. I have seen this in numerous gymnasts. This was me as a gymnast. And then I've seen this normal spine in numerous gymnasts that, in my opinion, were heading to the second one here. They were on their way, and we stopped and we went back and we reiterated the purpose and the imperativeness of using their core in a correct way. So that is stability. So our diaphragm keeps us safe, it keeps us stable. But what about energy transport? So our diaphragm not only keeps us safe and stable, it also increases our performance. So just like here, we have the bouncing of a ball. If we think of our core of this ball, if we maintain the energy within that ball, we can have continuous reaction. Newton's third law, for every action, there's an equal opposing reaction, only if we don't have a loss of energy in that system. So say we poke a hole in this ball, say that thoracic diaphragm isn't ready to go when we hit the ground. We have a hole in that ball, we lose energy. There's no way we're going to rebound with the same amount of energy that we put into that skill. So energy transport is imperative, or excuse me, thoracic diaphragm is imperative when it comes to energy transport of a gymnast that's blocking off a horse, that's blocking during tumbling, that's swinging through bars. I'm going to try to beat my battery here. All right, and then the last important key to think about when it comes to the thoracic diaphragm is how it influences our nervous system. So real fast, I want to explain the differences in our autonomic nervous system. So we have our fight or flight, and then we have our rest and digest. Those are known as our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. Now, our sympathetic nervous system is that fight or flight. So if you're being like chased by a bear, your sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive. It creates things within your body that help you get away, that help you manage stress. So your skin gets a little sweaty. So we know the girls that like have the hyperactive sweat on their hands and their feet, and they're always having to use chalk. So sympathetic nervous system makes our palms real sweaty. It makes our arms real sweaty. So see, if a bear went to scratch you, they'd slide right off you. It makes our pupils super dilated so that we can see more. It shunts blood out to big muscles so that we can get away. It increases our adrenaline. It increases our heart rate. So that's fight or flight. Then the other side of the spectrum is our rest and digest. Rest and digest is exactly what it sounds like, but it's where our pupils constrict so that we don't get as much stimulus. Our adrenaline goes down. We shunt blood to our internal organs. We calm down. Our blood pressure is down. Our heart rate is down. We can utilize oxygen a little bit better. So what does this have to do with our diaphragm? Well, if you look over here, I'm going to use my pointer, my mouse as a pointer. You see this yellow. This yellow is vagus nerve that comes through, pierces through the diaphragm. And every time the diaphragm contracts, it stimulates or kind of massages that nerve. Now, the vagus nerve increases our parasympathetic tone, or our parasympathetic response. So say we're about to do a beam routine at nationals. Where do you think my autonomic nervous system is? Fight or flight, baby. I'm like freaking out. I'm sweating. My eyes are like this. My heart rate's going like this. If I stop and I take a few low diaphragmatic breaths, I'm using my diaphragm. I'm contracting my diaphragm. I'm stimulating that nerve. I have now just decreased my sympathetic response, increased the parasympathetics. I'm now more neutral. I'm now ready to take on that beam routine, much more than when I was in that fight or flight, like anxious mode. Anxious, think fight or flight, anxious. So utilizing your diaphragm to help your nervous system. I put here, like, it decreases nerves, right? So you can use the diaphragm, biohack your way into being a better competitor. I also think that this is a really great tool or muscle to get in and use and think about as we're switching gears. So we have so many gymnasts that come from school environment and they go into practice. You have no idea what happened at their school that day. Did they, schools are stressful in today's climate, to say the least, but did they have a bad test? Did they break up with their boyfriend? Did their friend yell at them? Did they get in a fight with their parents on the way to the gym? Are they really nervous about their homework that night? So when they get to the gym, they need to be ready to do gymnastics. They can't be in that same mindset that they're in a school. So what I encourage is taking a 5-minute break between school and between practice, closing your eyes, going through some deep belly breath or diaphragmatic breathing, stimulating that thoracic diaphragm, getting it primed, getting it ready to be used during practice. That helps them switch gears, but it also neurologically helps them prime that muscle to be able to be used in their dynamic movements in practice. Okay, so I hope that you guys gathered some really great pertinent information from this today. I hope it was understandable. I hope it was clear enough. If you have any questions at all, I'm trying to beat my 1% up here. Please email me at Dr. Sloan Burdick. Burdick is my maiden name at gmail.com, or you can catch us at gymnastfix.com. If you would like these notes, please just email me. I'll send you a copy. Yeah. So, oh, also, if you send me an email, I will respond with a video that's going to give you more information on how to physically incorporate this muscle work in with your gymnast. So I'm going to give you an exercise, a drill to be able to utilize so that you can translate what you've just learned here into practice with your girls. All right, you guys, I hope that you enjoyed. Please, I'd love to hear from each and every one of you. You guys have a great day. And I'm out.